Hey everybody, welcome to Whiteboard Wednesday. What I'm going to do is explain how the boys and I every year take still hunting, tracking, and calling and combine them together to be able to get a lot of the deer that we get every year. How do you think you would hunt this scenario? When you get out of the truck and you have a buck and a doe crossing the road. You start following them up through a brand new clear cut. And you come to like an island in the middle of the cut. Fair-sized chunk of woods, say a couple acres, and there's some greenery in it, and it all looks pretty good. What's likely to happen, say this is just the beginning of the doe chase phase, and the doe crossed the road in the middle of the night and came up through, started feeding, did a bunch of wandering inside of here. Then the buck came along following her track, and he made just a couple of quick hooks. Say she was laying down in here and got up and went boing-a-boing-a-boing-a-boing and ran across and worked up to this other area up here. The buck comes along, does his routine, and here's where he went, and he's running now. And up we go. As a hunter, when you hop out, you'll have to start determining a timeline of when things happen. Now, of course, you can't really determine too much just yet because you're not sure just how old everything is, and you start up along the track and you enter this piece of woods. Another thing to keep in mind is that the wind is coming across. As soon as I would start into this chunk of woods, myself, I would stick, especially if it only seemed to be those two deer and I didn't see any other deer tracks, and I got in here and there was a maze of stuff kind of going all over the place. Because the wind is blowing this way, I would stay with this side of the barnyard, and right off the bat I would come to this bed. If I stayed just with the deer tracks that I could find that weren't leaving. They weren't leaving this area and going somewhere else. Everything turned and went back into the middle. I would stay around this side of it. I'd probably come to this bed and see running away. Now, it's not the buck's track, so I would ignore that and keep coming. And then I would find the buck coming out through this way. I would immediately, just like we talked about in one of our scenarios in the shop here on the floor, I would stay around the outside of the barnyard on the downwind side of it and hook right around. And if the buck left and he went running out of it, I would follow him and take them right out across the cut. If I was hunting and I thought that maybe they would be right here, if I did some calling when I first got into the barnyard, this would be a great time to call right here. And if the two deer were right there someplace, or especially if the buck was behind but he was trying to figure this out and you did some calling, he might come right to you. This would be a great location to call. And if I called and didn't hear anything, then I would continue hooking the barnyard, looking for the buck to leave, and as soon as I found him leaving, I would start right out through. If I get into the cut and it's out in the open now and I can see quite a distance, I would, before I got out into the open, I would really look on this side and see if they were up in here someplace. I'd find the general direction they were running, and I'd spend some time with my binoculars looking this chunk up here over as I went. I'd move across the opening, following the jumping and making sure that it's the same all the way across, and see how attentive the buck is right to her track. And if he jumps a ways and then goes to walking up through there, that'll tell you maybe he's a little bit farther behind and he's really interested. If she's running and jumping and he's running and jumping, odds are pretty good that he saw her or he heard her run off, and they're going across this together. So if they continue to run the whole distance, there's pretty likely that they're together. The other possibility too is if they were right here and I came along and they both ran off together. Either way, it doesn't make much difference. They go up into the next chunk of woods, I start looking for them, and I don't see them. In all actuality, the doe was laying here, the buck came along, and she got up and ran. He didn't know she ran, he looked for her, then figured things out and went out after her, and there was some time in between them, just a little bit. When they get up in here, the doe will run out through and stop, and then come back over here, and she's had a little chance to wonder just what the deal is, and she doesn't want to go too far, but she's run a fair distance to get away and get some time and distance in between them. And then he comes along and he just cuts right to the chase. He can get right in here, he gets on her downwind side, he smells her and runs right after her. Now as I come along and I'm working my way up through, again, I'm going to get up here, I'm going to see the intersection, I'm going to stay down a little bit and look, and it's just doe tracks going in this direction. And then as I go around, the buck went uphill. I want to know what they're both doing, but the doe went out here a little bit. That'll give me some clues as to the timing of the two of them and how closely they are together. They take off and run up through into the next section of woods, and I can see in between the two, and they could very well likely be up here, and I can see it's another island of woods up above. I would probably myself, now instead of going up through here, and they could be along this edge or see me, and it's pretty thick and it's near the top of the hill, this is where I might depart from the track, work my way down through this chunk, have another good look here, and if I didn't see anything, cut across. I'd have the best chance of making my way out through the end here and come up on the downwind side of this block of woods. As soon as I entered that block of woods, I would go right in the center and near the top, if anything, maybe on the far side just a whisker, and I would zigzag and keep a shooting lane as I worked my way through. The second I came into buck tracks, I would take every buck track that tried to leave on the outside of the circle. All the way through this, I've been keeping track and staying to the outside, trying to keep him from leaving in this direction. I'll work right through all that, following and hunting, checking for the buck's track especially, and deer tracks in general, making sure that nothing goes down over the hill and leaves in any direction. Hunt right up through here. They did a whole bunch of circling, and this is just this big barnyard, and then finally they came to rest over on the far side here. I hunt through this nice and slow and easy. Again, circling the barnyard, making sure nothing leaves as I finish this part of the circle, and I come into like their tracks, and then I happen to see a deer. I spend a little time and then finally shoot the deer, and with any luck I'll be dragging him home at the end of the day. There's a lot of different ways to hunt this, and there's plenty of places where calling would come into play. I would definitely want to call at the beginning of the first barnyard. Once I got up inside of here, and especially if this wasn't very thick of woods and I could see through a fair share of it, there's probably not too much point in calling. If there's not much distance between here and there, if I did call here, it would be real quiet and real easy in case they were standing there someplace. But I don't want to try and attract them in the cover out to the edge or part way and then see me go across the opening. So I would not call very loud, if at all, right here. When I circled through and checked and used this as cover to get downwind and then work my way through that next block of cover, as soon as I come up on this end over here, this would be a great place to maybe stop and wait a long time and call, or just take my time and work through it a ways until there was a larger concentration of tracks in here. And when I had a good vantage point, especially like shooting lanes across, down the middle, and on the far side, and this would be a great place to call on the very top where I can see in a few different spots. Again, I would just call real easy. I wouldn't call real loud because we haven't finished figuring out this barnyard situation. As I work my way around and I get near what I think is the end of this block of woods, a little more serious calling here would also be a good idea, because if they're between here and here, I've got a fair chance of seeing them, and I want to catch them and hold them a little bit longer, especially if they might see me as I work my way along the top of the ridge. If something goes wrong and the wind comes over the hill and there's some gusting going the wrong direction, they very well may smell me because of the curl from this ridge here. The wind comes over the top and curls around, and it might blow up here. Guess where the deer are going to run if I bust them? They're going to work their way right up through here and down through and into another area. So knowing where to call and when to call along the track, and how to use the wind as you go and handle each of the barnyards that you'll encounter as you come along is very important. Now I can send Taylor back to the truck. Thanks for liking and subscribing. Appreciate you all watching, and hopefully you can use some of these tips. Whiteboard Wednesdays are kind of everybody's favorite, and we appreciate y'all. Take care. Bye-bye.